Welcome to Moms Who Lead, where each week I talk to another mom who's balancing motherhood with a leadership role at work. Across industries, locations, and backgrounds, we're all facing the same challenges and opportunities. We talk about them here to help you balance your most important job with your career. So many of us have stories to share and advice to give. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And be sure to connect with me, Diana Mitchell, on LinkedIn. Now on to the show. I'm super excited to have Betsy Sewell here. She's the head of marketing at Aware, and I'm already super impressed with her sign, so I know this is going to be good. Hi, Betsy. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Diana. Thanks for having me.
No diggity. That's so good. Can you just tell me and tell all of us a little bit about yourself, about your kids, and about Aware?
Yeah, so like you said, my name's Betsy. I run marketing at a technology startup here in Columbus, Ohio, and I have two kids. I have an almost 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they just both went back to school. So we've got kindergarten and third grade on our hands now.
Oh, that's so exciting. I love this time of year, and I love seeing everybody's pictures.
Yeah. It's like the obligatory, like, first day of school. What do you want to be when you grow up? And, the third grader, of course, is like, I don't know, like, leave me alone, stop taking pictures. And the kindergarten is like, I want to be an artist and a scientist and a zoologist and a princess. And, it's like, it's a step ahead of last year, which was a cheetah.
Oh, well, yes. Aim high, though. I love it. Oh, that's great. So 6 and 8, those are funny just too. My nephew's 8. So, and I know it's same. It's, I love just having conversations with him. So at what stage of your career, so you're head of marketing now, when your kids, when you first, had your firstborn, where were you in your career? What stage?
Yeah, so I was still fairly early in my career. I had a number of years under my belt, and I had thankfully taken the time to really put in the extra hours in those years and take advantage of, kind of the childless days of, I'll take on every project. I will stay late. I've always loved working, and I've always loved my job. So I've been really lucky in that sense. But at a certain point, I knew I wanted to have kids. And so at that time, I actually made the decision to step away from working in ad agencies, which were pretty high demand, high pressure. And I took a new role at a smaller company. It was a nonprofit, and I was charged with leading marketing there. So I was, in a similar type of role now where I was, over marketing, but I was a marketing team of one, and it was a pretty supportive company. And I was actually pregnant at the time that I took that role. And so that was with my first, and I had both of my babies with that company. And so that was just a fun little part of my journey in my career.
That's very cool. I can see, I came from agencies initially out of grad school too, and that is a very demanding environment. So good for you. But that smaller company, and particularly nonprofit, it tends to be a different mindset and culture. And I find it really interesting that you were pregnant when you started too, because that's such a taboo thing, right? And so many women are afraid of that.
I was terrified.
Did you tell them and everything they knew?
So I went through it was pretty early in my pregnancy. I went through the interview process without disclosing, but at the point where I had an offer on the table at that time, I did disclose it. And thankfully, my dad has a background in human resources and human resources management. So he was kind of, coaching me along the way. But I did tell them, and they were really supportive, and they were like, that's great. Of course, we want our people to have families and start families, and this is a really exciting time in your life. And so they were great. And, they were great with my second one as well.
That's wonderful. And that actually, I was going to ask you, like, did you feel stressed or anxious about it? And can you talk a little bit, because I find that through these and other conversations that the experience varies so widely, what it was like for you when you left and went on leave and when you came back. So did you feel overwhelmed and stressed, or, was there a nice plan in place? Like you said, you're a marketing department of one, and I've been there too. And that is insane. There's not many purple squirrels like us out there, I guess. I'm not trying to toot our own horns, but it is a totally different beast when you're doing everything yourself. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I am by nature a big planner. So I spent a lot of time leading up to maternity leave, really just making sure that everything was documented, that I had plans in place, that there really wouldn't be that much that needed to be covered while I was out. There might be some minimal things here and there, but I just had a lot of pre-work that I did and I put into going into maternity leave. Coming back was overwhelming for sure as a first-time mom. I think just being a first-time mom is overwhelming. And it's exciting and you're like happy and you have this little baby, and then you have to like leave them at daycare or with a babysitter or whatever it is. And no matter what decision you make, I think, at least this is what I've heard from others and that I experienced myself, is that you question that decision for the first many weeks of like, did I pick the right daycare? Did I make the right choice? I knew for me, like staying home wasn't an option, both because that financially wasn't an option, but also because I wasn't going to make a great stay-at-home parent. And so it did take a number of weeks to really get settled into being okay with leaving my child at daycare, but just figuring out how to like navigate the workday. I mean, I was breastfeeding, so I needed to pump throughout the day. And we didn't have a good place to do that in our office. We didn't have a designated area. So I kind of made one. We had an oversized handicap stall in the bathroom, which like bathroom is not ideal, but I knew, we didn't have a lot of traffic in the bathroom. I actually rolled a desk in there and like made up a little setup and put a chair and like a lamp and made it as cozy as I could. But so many women don't even have that. I remember talking to my sister early on. She had her son not quite a year before I had mine. And she would tell me how she would have to go to her car and pump and how miserable it was. And I just remember thinking like, okay, I can make the best of this situation, but it's hard and nobody tells you, and you don't think about those types of things when you're pregnant until it's time to think about them.
Yeah. And I feel like we've all heard horror stories about breastfeeding or pumping at work. And this is one area where if there are any employers listening right now, like take note. It could be as simple as taking a little closet and repurposing that. Like we're all used to doing things in small space. Like once that motherhood gene hits, like you become used to going to the bathroom in 30 seconds. You can do anything in a small space. Like we become kind of superhuman in that way, but just the effort can go a really long way.
Yeah. And a bathroom is not ideal, quite frankly.
No.
Like I made it work, but that's one of the things that I really try to champion when I know that there are new moms coming into like our company is we don't need to ask them whether they're planned to nurse or not. That's none of our business, but we need to make space available so that they don't have to ask that question.
Yeah,
because not everybody is necessarily as assertive as maybe I am. And they may not feel comfortable asking like, hey, do we have a nursing room? Can we make a nursing space?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are still afraid of asking those questions because it will somehow disqualify them or give an employer an out and a reason not to hire them, which is really sad, but it still happens. It happens.
Yeah.
So make it easy and be upfront.
Yeah. And I was really lucky in that role. I had another, we'll say more experienced mom that I worked pretty closely with. And she was just really helpful in sharing her experiences, commiserating, saying, just reminding me that, this is going to pass. Your kids are going to be fine. Like, okay, so your child isn't sleeping or they're not nursing well, or they're not walking when you think every child should be walking, but ultimately like you're going to be fine. The kid's going to be fine. They're not going to be still trying to sleep in your bed when they're going to college, I think is the phrase that she would always tell me. I'm like, okay, I got this. We can make it.
That's so funny. And the one thing I'm trying to remember if this is in an everyday conversation or here in the podcast. The one thing that I've learned over the last few years is that all the things they say, whether it's a mom, a mentor, a colleague, everything that people tell you is pretty much true. A, it does go by fast. Enjoy the moment. B, it will be okay. Like all of those things that you think they don't know. It really, everything is true. All the things that people give you, those little tidbits and advice are pretty much true. So like take a deep breath. Yeah,
they are, but it's really hard when you're in the moment to appreciate that until you can look back and say, oh, they were right. So, as a new mom, and one of the things I try to be careful about when I'm talking to new moms or giving advice is like, they don't realize it. They're so overwhelmed and stressed. Their hormones are all over the place. And So just to be like supportive, encouraging, and empathetic. Remember, you at one point were in those same shoes. And at that time, it did not seem like it was going to be okay.
Yeah, I think empathetic, you really hit the nail on the head too. Like I was suffering from pretty severe postpartum depression, and I, not that I go in assuming, but if I made a new mom, I tried really carefully because that it's so frequent and people are so ashamed to talk about it that I just want to make sure that someone knows that they're not alone to that point, because it
Yeah.
can, it's so overwhelming. And then you add work, and especially if you're in a leadership role to that. And for you doing everything at the time, I can't imagine, even as a planner, how it may have felt pretty darn stressful. And so, to that point, you're a planner, you were doing everything yourself. Was there a moment where it like clicked for you and you're like, I've got this, or even a moment where you were just like, I need a little extra help and had to kind of reach out?
Yeah, it was a really interesting time for me. So when I was pregnant with my second, like very early on in that pregnancy, I went through a really tragic and traumatic divorce. And that left me as a single mom, like full-time, 100%. Well, of one, and pregnant with then what will become two. So by the time I maybe felt like I could catch my breath and feel like, oh, I've got this, then suddenly my whole life was really flipped upside down. And, I had those same supports in place at that company because, it was the same company and they were really supportive throughout the process. But it wasn't really until I got through all of that, I had my second child, all of the kind of trauma of the divorce was finalized, and I felt like I was in a safe and secure place. And that's when I started to be able to really maybe take a breath and feel like, okay, this is becoming pretty routine. And quite frankly, at that point, that's when I decided, let's change everything up again. And I switched roles and went to another company.
That makes sense, that you feel like a different person, right? And so you want to just kind of turn that page. I get it. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, like working with that company at that time was the best thing that it could have been for me at that point in my life, and for going through all the things that I went to. And it's just then that chapter was kind of closed and I opened a new one. I had a great opportunity to go do something different with my career, with an equally supportive in many different ways type of organization. I went from a very small nonprofit to a huge Fortune 200 company.
Oh yeah, totally different. And
Yeah.
it's interesting. Can you kind of like compare and contrast what it was like for you, especially as a single mom? I mean, and all the respect in the world. I mean, my husband was a stay-at-home dad with my daughter until this week. And so I understand the incredible like luxury. Not many guys, first of all, would even do that, but I couldn't fathom going through that alone. And so to have that proper support and infrastructure at work would be instrumental, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It kept me afloat and kept me focused on something, and knowing that I could have a bad day, or I could have a day where I just like was in a fog, and at work I would have support, and it just really, I can't imagine. I'm really lucky to have that, not the experience of what I went through, but to have had maybe the support that I had as I went through it, because not everyone is quite so lucky. And so, I went from this small company to a Fortune 200, and they were, I worked with a small team in a really large company, and my boss at that organization was amazing. She's, probably one of the most poised women and empathetic women that I've ever met. And, watching her and how she handled some of the politics and the different things that maybe happen in a large organization, that was a really good learning opportunity for me. And I think I hope that I took a lot of that away and use that in how I lead my team today. But I thankfully can say I've never really had a bad experience when it comes to being a working mom.
That's wonderful. And I think it's funny, there's a recurring theme so far in these interviews that I've done, but whether informal or formal, that kind of like mentor and a leader that you can look up to. In your first organization, it was really helping you as a mom. And the second, it was as a professional and as a whole person. I think that's so important. And actually, we were speaking before we started recording about this, about a whole person. And I think this is a good time to maybe talk about that, because it feels like you really have had great experiences, which is so wonderful. And I think that there's a lesson here. And we were talking about the fact with COVID and all of the difficulties that so many people have had in the last year and a half, that organizations who are focusing on people are reaping the rewards when it comes to talent.
Right.
Can you kind of talk about that a little?
Yeah. So that's one of the things that we're pretty focused on at my company that I'm with today at Aware. And I was just reading some research from Gartner recently, and they actually released a stat that 82% of employees feel that it's important the organization sees them as a person, not just an employee. And organizations who really focus on that human-centered workplace are going to be the ones who succeed. Those are going to be the ones who retain talent, who employees want to work for, that they feel engaged and empowered to do great work. And I mean, if you think about yourself as a person, it just makes sense. Like, of course I want to work for a company who views me as a person first and an employee second. And that's really, at Aware, that's our culture. We are people first. And we, as leaders, we all acknowledge that all of our employees and our team, they have other things happening in their life that's not just work. And I try to make sure that, at least with my team, that they always know, I don't want you to miss your kids' important events, or I don't want you to feel like you need to be here clocked in 8 to 5 and you can't go to a doctor's appointment or you can't flex your days. And we really try to make our workplace flexible, not just in how you construct your day, but in how you go about your work, and making sure that you have a fulfilled life and that you do take time to step away and recharge, because that's going to make you a better worker.
Right. Like, it seems so sensical and obvious. And yet I was doing another interview a few weeks ago, and she said that earlier in her career, her kids were older, that she had a boss who would like help her sneak out the back door if her kid was sick. And I thought, well, A, that's so nice, but B, how sad. Like,
I know,
and that shouldn't happen today. And I'm sure it does in other instances, but my gosh, like, and again, I think there is a shift coming, because, it's about output. Okay. Are you getting your work done? Are you making an impact on the company? Who cares? And yeah, we're seeing all these headlines lately of like the return to work. Should people be charged or earning less money if they're working remotely? Should this, and it's like, they're looking for every opportunity to slash that employee experience instead of learning from it and growing and expanding. And it's kind of crazy, particularly since there's still the talent shortage. Like, there was that temporary period where employers were like, haha, we have the upper hand now. And then it immediately flipped right back. And now talent's in the hot, completely sitting in the catbird seat. So why wouldn't an organization do this? Not only because they want to attract and retain talent, but because it's the right thing to do. And hopeful. And, just for the example you gave, as a young company, a startup, that, when you're built on the foundation of doing things the right way, that it influences a company as they continue to grow and become larger. But I think that your example, particularly in tech, you said, is a big one too, because there's a lot of disparity in tech as well. And providing that perspective as a working mom and a mom in leadership is really important, and sharing that story too, to inspire other tech companies to be more inclusive, not only including women, including people of color, including parents, and providing those supportive environments.
Yeah. And I love that, you said it focused on the output. We actually have a sign in our office that says like outcome over hours. It's not about how many hours you work. We want to make a difference, and we want to make a difference, not just in the work that we do, but in the people that we work with. And that's important in our company, and hopefully in the companies that we work with as well. But I don't want to make it seem like everything is always rainbows and butterflies. There are certainly a lot of challenging things as a working mom, and it's not, I probably, maybe from the outside, it might appear that I have it all together all the time, but that is not the case at all. It is like constantly overwhelming. And for me, I don't have a go-to village. Unfortunately, like my closest immediate family, they don't live here in town. So I don't have an immediate network to pull from to say like, I need help. But I do. Everybody needs help. I mean, especially as a single mom, that's even more so. And so I rely a lot on either babysitters, which not everybody has the luxury of being able to afford babysitters or aftercare or different, resources like that. And so I'm really lucky for me that I can lean on a sort of paid village versus having that inherent village already around me. But I totally understand that's a privilege for me. And that's not the case for so many working parents or single working parents or just anyone else who feels like they're drowning half the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And even though there's no doubt in my mind, it's way harder for you than it is for me. You're right. We are both still very lucky. And that's a good thing to have. And it comes back again to empathy for other moms and other dads and other parents who are working and struggling, because it's tough no matter how you slice it. And to that point, maybe we should bring up some inspiration because, and we were talking about this before we hit record as well, there's so much advice. What is there a piece of advice that you kind of like remind yourself? It doesn't have to be a mantra per se, but something that really resonated with you and helped you maybe through a difficult time, or just that you kind of go back to frequently as well?
Somebody once said to me that, every day or every time I would have like a bad experience or just like really down, like this is just a minute in time. Like it'll pass and things will be different. And sometimes they'll get better and sometimes they won't. But ultimately it's just a point in time. It's just a season. And that's something I kind of go back to when I'm overly stressed or like everything seems like it's falling apart. I'm overwhelmed at work. My kids are running around like wild animals. They don't want to do their homework. They don't want to go to bed. They don't want to like cooperate and do all of the things. And it is a good reminder that it's just a point in time. And, there's this too shall pass, which I guess is the more eloquent way of saying that, but that just feels kind of like stodgy to me. So it does. And ultimately, a couple of days later, we might have a really great day and everything seems to go really well. And I can sit back and I feel like I can take a breath and relax.
Yeah, that's a great feeling, isn't it?
Never seems to last, but
no, but in those fleeting moments, it really is blissful. I hear you.
Yeah. And I think those moments are probably an important reminder that, look, you will have these moments and you will have hard times. And it's not like, no matter what you think everyone is going through, it's probably not as perfect and easy as they maybe make it seem, or maybe just your own perception of what it is. In reality, everybody has other things going on that maybe they're just not so open about it as the person next to them.
Yeah. Social media has made it way harder for people to acknowledge that life is difficult sometimes because people so carefully curate their lives.
Yeah.
But that's a great reminder.
But even without social media, I mean, how often do you see someone, maybe another parent at school where they're not going to just walk around talking about how terrible their day was and everything else that went wrong. You're probably going to hear like, oh, here are the highlights, or, hey, everything's great. Or you see them happy in that moment. But what you don't see is maybe they get into the car and suddenly their kid is like, I don't know, like this happened to me yesterday, throwing apples at their head.
Apples.
Yeah.
Oh man, I thought you were going to say like Cheerios, like that's apples.
It wasn't like in a violent way.
No, I know.
Don't get me wrong, but it was like, I'm done with this and I'm going to throw it up here.
That's awesome. But it's a good point. I know. And you're right. No one's going to go broadcasting that. So we could demystify this in conversations like this and make sure everyone knows it's normal to have apples flung at your head and to, have two different color socks on by accident and all of those things.
One of the things that we've done, or, that I started early on in the pandemic when, we all were we had gone from a pretty much all in-person office to this completely remote. All of our kids got sent home from school. We were all losing our minds. And so in our organization, we communicate over a platform called Slack. And I started a channel in Slack that was surviving pandemic with children. And that's where we go. And we tell all of the crazy stories that have happened with our children. And everybody's like, oh, wait, I can top you. And it's actually, it provides some comic relief. It probably provides some really great birth control to the people who are not parents yet. And then it also gives you that, like, okay, it is not just me. I'm not the only one who's experiencing these challenges with my children, or, there's always some sort of feel good, like, let's all laugh about it and then realize we're in it together.
No, I love it. That's good. That's great. And thank you so much for being so open and candid. And I think it's really helpful to hear these conversations without filter, so that people feel less alone and feel like it's okay. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to cry. It's okay to do all of those things because we've all been there. Yeah.
I mean, everybody who knows me well knows that it's probably not a week goes by where I don't tell somebody that, like, my kids are being assholes today. Like, it happens. I love my kids to death and they're great, but they also can be big assholes.
I think, cats, kids, all of them. Yes, absolutely. I say that as someone who clearly has had cats for a long time. But yeah, kids, that's funny. I know what you're saying. And I think everyone's felt that way, at least. Yeah. What'd you say?
And it's okay to feel that way. Nobody is saying that, like, that means you don't love your kids or that you don't care about them or you don't want them. It is okay to feel like that.
That's funny. So thank you, because this is great. And, but if someone wants to learn more about Aware or connect with you, what do you recommend for the best way to learn more?
Yeah, feel free to, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message. And then if you want to learn more about Aware and our culture, we will and are currently hiring, and we will be for the foreseeable future. You can visit awarehq.com.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Betsy.
Thank you.
Take care.
Great. All right. Thanks, Diana.
Thanks for sitting in with us this week. My hope is that you feel supported, understood, and heard. I appreciate that you took the time to be here. Let me send a quick shout out to our subscribers who join me here every week. I am so honored. And if you haven't already, be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn. The URL is linkedin.com/in/Diana Mitchell 716. Take care out there, everyone.